Hey y'all, this is Jake. Before we get started with this week's episode of Decision Space, I want to give a very brief update. First, Brendan's not here this week. For what you'll hear in a second is a very good reason. So I'm joined this week by friend of the show and personal friend of mine, Pete Wissinger. Unfortunately, when we recorded, we had a little bit of a spotty internet connection, and I found out in the edit that the last 30 minutes of our conversation got corrupted and is really pretty much unusable. So this week, you'll hear 50 minutes of us talking about our recent plays at Gamers Ranch. That includes discussion of great games like Dune Imperium, Uprising, Blob Party, Schadenfreude, Robot Quest Arena, and Three Ring Circus. So I just wanted to let you know up front that's a little bit of an abrupt ending this week, and I'm really sorry about that. But hey, 250 plus episodes in, and this is really the first time this happened, so I'll take it. Anyway, let's do it.
Talking back.
Welcome to Decision Space, the only show that takes place right here in the space between your turns of your favorite games. I'm Pete Wissinger.
And I'm Jake Friedman.
And this is the podcast about decisions in games.
And today we're going to be talking about Gamers Ranch, a really cool board gaming centric vacation property right here in Missouri that Pete and I both had the opportunity to go to this past weekend and play a ton of games. So we'll be talking about the games we played there, about the property itself, and just how cool it is. And it should be a great episode. You may be wondering where Brendan is, and he is on a little break because Brendan and his wife Maya welcomed a brand new baby into their family. So taking some much needed time at home. And he'll be back as soon as he can. But yeah, super happy for him, and everybody's doing really well.
Congratulations, Brendan.
I think he'll be back in the saddle soon. He was messaging me today about how he has like a 3-part what we talk about episode on drafting games planned. So he's in the lab. I think he's got some free time to just cook up notes. So it should be some good stuff coming when he gets back. But until then, Pete, thanks so much for coming back on the podcast.
Yeah, happy to be back. I think looking at my notes, it was exactly 1 month ago that we recorded my last guest spot.
Yeah, well, you got rave reviews, and I really appreciate you filling in. And I think it's perfect since a lot of the games we'll be talking about we played together. And I think we should just get right into it. So let's start with this. What is Gamers Ranch?
Yeah. So last year, this is sort of like an annual retreat that our mutual friend hosts. And last year, I only went for one day. And so this was my first time having the full Gamers Ranch experience. And it really is like this like crazy place that it doesn't feel like should exist in a way. Like it seems like the most like niche vacation property, but I'm glad that the demand for it exists because it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, every time I explain it to anybody, like, yeah, so it's like this vacation property that has like a board game collection of over 2,000 games on site, and you walk out the door and you step onto a disc golf course, and people are just like what? Like those are exactly the two things that you spend like all your free time doing. So it truly is just like feels like kismet that this place exists and is only like 2 hours away from where we live in St. Louis. It's just like almost too good to be true. How did you have a good first full trip there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Last time I was only there for one night. And like, so for me, this is like all of the best parts about going to a convention with like none of the bad parts. Right. Because looking at my list, so I got there Friday at about 6:00 and then stopped gaming on Sunday at around midnight. And I played 27 different games, which is crazy. And some of them were like 15 minutes long. Some of them took multiple hours. But like from when I finished breakfast until I passed out, I was basically playing games with the entire time. Like there was not even a time that I was like, I'm just going to go sit on the couch and like stare at my phone for a while. Like that just did not happen.
Yeah. And there's fun like diverting things too. There's a whole room of pinball tables set up free to play. There was a Golden Tee virtual golf machine that was getting some love from some people. And I mean, that stuff is so fun. So anytime you have a few minutes, it's like, yeah, I'll just like go do that. But I basically had no few minutes to do that because I was just like
I
game,
know.
game, game, game till I like pass out at 1:30 in the morning, wake up at 8. I was part of the group of people that steps out early or whenever people get motivated to do it, to do a disc golf round every morning, which is for me a huge selling point of it. Sometimes I feel a little bit like, I don't know, it can be difficult on my body. Just when I go to a normal board game convention, you're literally just sitting under the fluorescent lights in the convention hall, like just playing games. So having the ability to like get outside in the fresh air and do this other activity that happens to be more active and also happens to be like my other, hobby that I'm really passionate about is just so amazing. And I know, Pete, you managed to give disc golf a shot at least.
I did 9 holes as you were leaving. And, every time I do something like that, it lowers the barrier a little bit for me to start coming out to disc golf more often. So,
Cool. So you have a good time though?
yeah, I mean, it was me and one other person who just does not play. So there were like 2 people out of the 3 who are not avid disc golfers. And so I think that for both of us, it was very much a easy way to do it because we didn't feel like we were like holding back a whole group and we weren't like watching other people totally dominate the whole time. And so it was pretty fun to do that. Not that I would have felt unwelcome to go with you all on your morning excursions, but
No, I mean I totally get that.
yeah. And I shot under par too, so and no one is on this podcast to tell me that that's not something
Man,
that actually happened.
that's
So
so good. So yeah, well,
insane.
congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and then I guess the last thing the property has that's pretty awesome is it's just like on this big man-made lake, and so the disc golf course goes around the lake. So it's just like a nice place to be. It's beautiful there. And we donated plenty of discs to the pond, as of course is tradition. So it did feel a little weird being there in March this year, just because this is my third time that I've been lucky enough to join on this trip out to Gamers Ranch. In the past 2 times, it's like in the middle of summer, so there's been like swimming and like jumping in the lake to cool off too. So there wasn't as much of that, so it felt like we're missing a little bit of the lake amenity. But it still just adds so much to the place that you are gaming. So Gamers Ranch, really a cool place to be, and that sort of sets the stage for all the games that we're going to be talking about, which are kind of happening in between the sleeping, the eating. People were preparing like ridiculously good and kind of involved meals all weekend. We
Absolutely.
got soup in a bread bowl, homemade soup and bread bowls. That was unexpected, but very much appreciated. Pete made biscuits and gravy. So, yeah, the food was good. And then everybody there that we had the opportunity to game with are just like the best people, to a T. So, it was pretty magical. So you could kind of consider like all of these games that we're going to be talking about. Just know that we were playing them there, and maybe that's going to elevate them a little bit just by virtue of it pretty much ideal circumstances.
Yeah, Jake and I even had this conversation at the ranch because there were a couple games that we played that we were like, I don't know if this is actually good, but I'm having a blast because
Yeah.
when you're in an environment like that with the right people, it's like it's gonna make every game sing as much as it can, right? Like
Right.
it's like the ideal, and people were doing every type of game. Like the last night, there were 2 people who were just up in a loft, just the 2 of them playing Star Wars Rebellion, totally silent by themselves, while other people were like, and then I was at a table playing a like 12-person game of cartographers, and then in the other room, people were like yelling, playing So Clover or something, right? And so
Nice.
like, it creates an environment that like whatever kind of gaming you're into, you can do it there.
Yeah. And I think that's helped by the fact that the people there are all omni gamers, right? I think, there are definitely people who gravitate more towards heavy stuff and are doing that more. But everybody's doing a mix of party games, heavy games, etc. Just like you'd find at a con, just like you'd expect for this type of gathering. So Pete, let's get into it. Let's talk about some of the games we've been playing. And we don't often
Yeah.
have the opportunity to talk about some kind of games that are in the current hotness on this podcast just by virtue of the way we do the show. But I was hoping you could kick it off by telling us a little bit about your couple of plays of Dune Imperium Uprising.
Yeah, probably like the hot game right now, if nothing else, because of the tie-in to a current hit movie, right? So Dune Imperium Uprising is a funny one for me because there was this sort of like kind of controversy when it came out where like longtime fans of Dune Imperium were sort of annoyed that basically a second edition was being released just a couple years after the original game. And at that point, they'd come out with 2 expansions and people had heavily invested. They deluxified their copies, all that. And I had bought Dune Imperium around the time the Rise of Ix expansion came out. I had Rise of Ix. I probably played it like 8 times, maybe. I liked it a lot, but I kind of felt like I'd kind of gotten my plays out of it. And so when people were talking about Uprising being, new and cool, I had pretty much decided that I didn't need it. And then I saw Dune Part 2. And then as soon as I got home, I was like, that movie was so awesome. And I just like impulse bought Dune Imperium Uprising. Like literally the night that I watched Dune 2.
I had the same. I didn't buy Dune Imperium Uprising, but I have Dune Imperium Classic. Now we have to say Dune Imperium Classic,
Yes,
not to be
yes.
confused with
Imperium
Classics, which you
Yes,
talked about
for
last
sure.
time you were on this podcast.
Next, it'll be Dune Imperium Legends. Yeah. Anyway,
But it is right. But it is wild that just watching that movie, I have Dune Imperium Classic on myself, and I never really touch it. I played a couple times. I think it just hasn't like super hit for me in those 2
Yeah.
plays. But watching the movie, it's like I need to get this out, and it definitely made me more interested in this game.
Okay, so I unfortunately have to tell you that it actually is better. So I see it as almost a strict upgrade. So I was playing with people who had all played Dune Imperium. Actually, one of my games was with people who really loved Dune Imperium. I played it twice. And then the other game was with people who were like, Dune Imperium's like a 6 out of 10 game, right? So I had both experiences. Both I played with people who loved the original game and people who thought the original game was kind of overhyped. Both groups loved it. In fact, one of the people who thought Dune Imperium was like a 6 out of 10 game ordered a copy of Uprising as soon as our game overed.
Oh no.
And so here's what I think. If people aren't familiar with Dune Imperium, it is a deck builder / worker placement hybrid game. And Dune Imperium Uprising is essentially a second edition, but it's themed after the second movie. And I think that the thing that makes it better is it leans more into the deck building. As someone who loves deck building, I often find that deck building hybrid games don't give me enough of the deck building. And this one has more ways for you to draw and trash cards, which helps. And the cards themselves are more interesting and have more combo potential. And so just that is great. They also added a couple of new mechanics that are really cool, especially the spy mechanic, because it lets you go to spaces that are blocked. And since it's already hard to go to spaces in Dune Imperium, because you have to happen to draw the card that lets you go to the space you want to go, it feels extra bad in that game when you get screwed on turn order because someone else got there before you. And it's like, well, I might not even draw that card again next turn. And so I think it's just more exciting. And while Dune Imperium is this game where you're sort of gaining points by like, it feels like a game of inches where everyone's just like slowly working their way to 10 points. This game builds to more of a dramatic crescendo and someone doesn't like creep across the finish line. Someone is like blasting across the finish line. And it turns some people off because of that. But to me, I think the drama it creates is worth it.
Awesome. Definitely resonates with my experience with it. Interested to see this riff on it. I think the other observation, again, we talked about this at Ranch, was the fact that this feels almost like a patch to the original game, just released as a new game, because you had also played Feast for Odin with the Norwegians expansion,
Yes.
which is like a really similar thing, where it's, the Norwegians expansion for A Feast for Odin basically tells you like, throw out your main board and use this one instead with like rebalanced places. It's just, so it's kind of interesting, just the difference maybe in like public perception of, releasing it as like a $40 expansion versus like a
new base
$60 new base game.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it seems like they're kind of doing similar things to the core game experience, just like upgrading it.
Yeah, and some people are not going to prefer it because the swinginess of it is going to turn them off, because I think some people almost play Dune Imperium like this like hyper competitive, almost tournament style game. And this one is a lot, a lot of just like, oh wow, it's a game where you race to 10 points and that person just got 4 points. Like
Yeah,
that's nuts. So,
crazy. I guess the last thing I'll say about just it from like the gaming news perspective, I
mm,
just learned that they released the digital version of Dune Imperium, but it's like the classic one. And that's just
yeah.
I wonder if like Dune Imperium Uprising coming out is like it feels like what they are saying with the release of this product is like here's kind of like a better version of this game. But clearly, the digital version must have already been in development. And they obviously want to get every tie in with the movie being like this mega hit thing right now. So, like, get it out now. But it's just interesting that, by all accounts, the digital version of Imperium like is great.
Yeah.
And I think, if people want to try out this game, that seems like an awesome, cost affordable way to do it. But it's just interesting that that version is still this classic version. So if you want the Dune Imperium Uprising experience, you got to go for the physical board game.
Yeah. And I do think the original game is still good. And there definitely are people who prefer the original game. I am just not one of those people. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for your thoughts on Dune Imperium Uprising. I want to jump next to the game of the entire weekend for me. This was my thinking back on all the games we played, and this was like I think head and shoulders above the rest for like the most pure fun, enjoyment, and also memorable moments that I had all weekend. And that was a new to me party game called Blob Party. And this one we were both in. So the way Blob Party works is almost like a reverse Just One. So if you're familiar with the party game Just One, in that there's a clue and everybody's trying to write down a word that they associate with the clue. But if people reveal the same word, that's eliminated and that's bad. Here in Blob Party, you're trying to match other people. So the structure of the game is the components are really odd. Everybody gets a small piece of orange Play-Doh and a googly eye of their player color, and then a category and then an
Yeah.
item
Right.
are revealed on two different cards. So you might have television show and horse. And then everybody has to write on their dry erase board whatever they think other people in the game are also going to write.
Now, wait, Jake, I'm going to pause real quick because we can actually do this right now. You've just
Let's do
said
it.
television show horse, right? And so I think that we should see right now if our blobs would join.
Yeah, let's
Right?
do
I don't,
it.
I don't know if you have. I'll write
I've
mine
got
down.
one. I've got one.
All right, I'm going to show you mine, and you're going to say it, and then we'll see if we got the right thing.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. BoJack Horseman.
Oh no!
What'd you write?
I wrote Mr. Ed.
Mr. What is that? I don't know.
Okay, all right. Listen, I know
All
I'm a
right.
little bit older than you, but so Jake and I just failed this co-op game.
Yeah, we just like literally hit our different like I don't know, life experiences. Okay, but anyway, so that's how the game works. And we were playing it at first with some like 7 players or something.
Yeah.
But the way the game works is that if anybody else had written down Mr. Ed, then Pete and that player would join forces together. And for the rest of the game, they would consult each other and hold up just a single placard representing their blob. And then the same for me. If somebody else had written down BoJack Horseman, then we go together. And so there could be like multiple blobs forming. And the goal is that you all get to have to come together, forming a singular blob in 7 turns of play.
Yeah.
And that's the entire game.
Now, I think Jake, you'll agree that what made this game so great is the magic circle we were playing in, which was to absolutely ridicule anyone who was not a part of the blob.
Well, yeah, I mean, this was like clear. This was literally the meanest cooperative game I have ever played in my life. But even before things just got really like brutally mean, I was just like hit by like this like profound like emotional sense. Like as soon as I internalized like what we were doing, like literally on the second turn of the first game of this, it just like realized like, oh my God, like this is actually just like a game about like trying to like fit in with friends. It's just like such, like a deeply emotional, like human thing, and to fail at this game, it might like to be potentially the only person that can't get on the same page with all of your friends that you're playing with. It feels like, at least to me, it felt like really high stakes. Like I was like, oh my god, I don't want to be the odd man out. Like that's going to be really tough. And I think we all sort of had moments playing this game where you're pretty confident that like I think I'm on the same page as people, and then like six other people put one thing, and you didn't do it. And you're just like, oh no.
And there's so many funny parts to this. Because first of all, what it does mean though is that when you win, it is this like high that these games rarely actually deliver. Like we were like cheering when we
Yeah,
won. And that was heightened by the
totally.
fact that our second game of this, we had, I don't know, at least like a dozen people playing at once, which the game
I
does
think,
not support. So we
yeah, I
just
think
had
we
like
like
dry
opened
erase
up.
boards.
Yeah, we like opened up the Just One box, and we're just like, I think maybe a group was like originally gonna play Just One next to us or something,
Mm-hmm.
or we were all gonna try and play Just One, and then we're like,
It
wait,
was
no,
on the table as well. Yeah.
let's all play Blob Party together, and we could just all do this. But yeah, it's so funny too. Like I think just like the like psychological, like emotional things that are happening. Like if there are 14 people all on one team and then one person on by themselves, which happened to our poor friend Dave. And for like several rounds, like we just need to like group think together with Dave. And we're both holding up, I mean, we're both presenting a single word, and there's not an objectively right thing. There can't be. But to all the world, it sure feels like whatever the blob said, like, because there are more brains over there, like, they're like, whatever their consensus word in is when you're playing that game, it feels like that was the right thing, Dave. You should
That
have
wait,
definitely said spork.
oh my god! So that's the one I was gonna think of. So we were in a situation where every single person was one side, and it was just Dave, and the combo was technology spoon. Okay, which admittedly is a weird combo, technology spoon, and we as a hive mind all agreed that spork is spoon technology, and so we show spork, and Dave's board said ice cream scoop.
What an
We were all just like,
idiot. I can't
you.
believe he did
We were
that.
like screaming at him.
Or I want to do, okay, I'll leave this. I'll just say like I'm gonna buy this game for sure. I'm gonna bring it into work for my the next team meeting I lead. We're doing this as an icebreaker, 100%. I think it's gonna be awesome. I think my family would love it. Highly recommend this game to listeners of this podcast. I think if you like Just One, it's a word game, right? So if you like Just One, if you like So Clover games like that, this is like that, but just like a louder version. At least the way we played it.
And again,
And really,
this
really
was
fun. But
we were in the perfect environment for this
yeah,
game to hit the way it's supposed to.
but I wanted to leave listeners with just one thought experiment. Okay. When I say nature's scarf, I just want everybody to think
It was
of
just nature scarf. No
nature.
natures. Just
Okay. So
nature scarf.
scarf, nature scarf. Just take a second and think about what you might write on that placard. And if any of you out there would have written down scarf, or sorry, would have written
Sorry.
down sloth,
Sloth.
sloth, then you're right. That's the best thing anyone could have written down.
Oh no. Wait, you were the one who said sloth?
Yeah, I said sloth, and you guys to this
Jake,
day are still gaslighting me
Jake.
about how that was not the right answer.
Well, I mean, to be fair, there was no right answer there because someone on our team, a mutual friend Miles, was adamantly arguing that I was part of the big blob at that point. Was adamantly arguing that the best answer was boa constrictor, which we did not go for.
Whatever, so anyway, that's the game, and it's just hilarious. You just gaslight each other the whole time about how dumb you are for coming up with something that was just slightly off of everybody else, and just lots of funny moments. Really fun party game. But we should probably
For
move
sure.
on.
Yes.
What's the next one you want to talk about? Maybe we could just kind of like go back and forth.
Okay, so I'll do another one that we played together. As I talked about the last time I was on the show, I'm a big fan of trick taking games. And I limited myself to only bringing 10 trick taking games to the ranch, which, was a arduous process to decide which 10. And the one I brought that I specifically wanted to show people was one I got to play with you, which is called Schadenfreude. And Schadenfreude is a very strange Japanese trick taking game that I will be shocked if it does not get published in America, because among the uber trick taking nerds, it is highly ranked. And it is a game where the mechanics of the trick taking are weird, which is that the second highest card of the lead suit wins. And then it's doubly weird because the way scoring works. So if you win the trick, then you put your card in your score pile and it's worth however many points the card says. But then you have to take any cards that other players played off suit and also put it in your score pile, which you really have no control over. At that point, other players are deciding how many points to give you. And this is where the title of the game, Schadenfreude, comes in, which is, of course, a German word for taking pleasure in the suffering of other people. Because in this game, it ends when someone gets over 40 points. And after that happens, whoever has the next most points wins, unless they went over 40, and then it's the next most point that wins. So it's a game where you're not really sure what to do until like the second hand, third hand, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, I know what to do. Because you're just loving feeding points to the person who is getting close to 40. That person is doing everything they can to lose every trick, and it just ramps into this big finale that I think is pretty great. What did you think of Schadenfreude, Jake?
I loved it. I'm starting to figure out what my own tastes are in trick taking games. And I think there are two things that are kind of rising to the fore for me when I'm kind of evaluating, now that I'm playing a bunch of different trick taking games, like which ones really hit, which ones not. And I think this game has both of them. And the two factors I'm thinking about are like trick taking games that have like emergent gameplay, where like kind of the stakes and what cards mean are evolving over the course of play. Because I don't like it being kind of more novice to the genre. I have a hard time with trick taking games that are just like you have to know a lot right at the start of play, because I
Mm-hmm.
don't. So like when a game's asking me to like make like bids based on my hand and I don't even know how the game plays, that can be tough. So I really like how in this one, what you're trying to do with any given hand is changing from round to round, as you're saying, based on your position on the board. Some people are trying to lose tricks, other people are trying to maybe win tricks, or maybe trying to feed tricks to specific players. But also, like, even over the course of a hand, right? All of a sudden, oh man, I accidentally won like 10
Too many
points
points.
in
Yeah.
2 turns, and now like I thought I was way behind, and now everybody's like screaming like push Jake off the ledge. And I'm like, no, wait, don't. And I think that's the other thing I really like in trick taking games, is when they lead to fun table talk.
Yes.
And I think Schadenfreude really delivered on that too in this game. Again, really ideal conditions, playing with really fun people. But we had a lot of that, like, all right, guys, come on, we need to like kill Pete here or whatever.
Now, I believe you were the one who busted, right?
I did, yeah, I lost. I went over,
And so
you guys pushed me right off.
Yeah, and the person in second place had ended up with 39 points, and I was trying to push both of you off the edge because then I would have been the winner. And so technically I lost by 1 point.
And there was also like a weird moment, like kind of towards the end, where like the person who was in fourth place all of a sudden then was like maybe trying to help me, knowing that I was destined for going off the ledge, because that could mean that there'd be a whole nother round, which might be able to then push all the other three players off
Yep.
the ledge or whatever.
It's so fun.
Yeah, so that I thought it was great. I appreciated you teaching it, and I think like after only one play of it, it's right up there among my favorites, which I think now is Nikosu Dice, Schadenfreude, and Tricky Time Crisis.
Yeah, and this one kind of reminds me of Tricky Time in that there's this like busting mechanic.
Yeah.
Which is,
And a big table talk mechanic. Like that one's great for the table talk.
I have to say, I overheard some of the best table talk I've ever heard walking through the Gamers Ranch for a game I was not playing and have never played. Because there was a group of people playing a long game of Hegemony, which for people who don't know, that is a game of asymmetric politics where every person represents a different like social class. Like one player is the working class, one player is the middle class, one player is the capitalist class, and one player is the state, the government. And I was walking through, and the guy playing the capitalist was like, listen, it's not my fault. My taxes are just too high. And the government guy was like, but you've got your wages all the way down at the very bottom. He's like, you're killing me. And I was just like, wow, this game is obviously doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
Hegemony is it's like a staple of the Gamers Ranch. Last year, people were playing it like constantly. And I think it's the same folks that are like really invested in playing it and love it. This is kind of a good topic of conversation. My goal going into Gamers Ranch is just to like say yes to playing games, just go with the flow. Happy to play anything, with the exception of like trying to avoid getting sucked into really long playing games.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just because I know I have major FOMO. So if I'm in a game that is going kind of long, I'm going to feel bad that I'm like missing out on all the fun stuff that's happening all around me.
Yeah.
So, some people love, taking these long weekends as like an opportunity to play games that they never get the chance to play. I think for me, like if I wanted to play a 3, 4, 5 hour game, I think I'd rather have that set aside for like a single, like scheduled for a
Sure.
day. And then, but like with this, like I'm with you, right? I played like 20 games this weekend, and that was like just pure bliss.
Yep.
But yeah, it is funny, like the Hegemony folks, like, and it even extends like after the game, right? Because then they're doing like the debrief, and you're like just seeing people on the couches and be like, yeah, like the upper class, like blah 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 blah. And you're just like, is this like, was this like politics talk, or like you really truly don't know? Which is, I mean, amazing.
Yeah. All right. Your turn.
Yeah, so I was going to move the conversation to another topic, which is there are 2 games that we played together, and both of them were games that we learned fresh out of the rule book. So we tried, as an experiment on this trip, bringing out sticky notes. So people could take a sticky note, write their name on it, and stick it to games all over Gamers Ranch in the collection to say, like, this is something that I'm interested in playing. And or you could go around and see other people's sticky notes and like add your name to it. And I think it worked really well in sort of just kind of cutting through some of the downtime that can exist when people are just like trying to figure out what to play. Often at these kinds of things, there might be 3 or 4 people kind of standing around together, like, hey, you guys looking for a game?
Mm-hmm.
And then you could kind of like look at the shelf, especially like right when you walk in the door, there's like a big shelf of like new to the ranch games, which is like all new hotness games, basically. Whatever you want that's new is pretty much there. So a lot of those games, people are kind of like centralizing on. So you kind of walk up, people look at those and be like, oh, like, well, 2 of our names are on this. You guys want to like try that? So it worked really well for that. So for these 2 games, I think came about because of that system, and we learned them both from the rulebook. So maybe we should talk about the experience of learning and playing them.
And I want to say real quick that sitting down on game night, fresh with the game and saying, I'm just going to read the rulebook out loud to the table and we're going to learn to play, is, in my mind, almost never an ideal way to learn a game.
Yeah. If people do that, I think you're insane. Like, no offense.
I have one friend that I can do that with. So my friend Jared and I, we can do it if it's just the 2 of us. And we're like, okay, we need to get over the barrier of learning this game. We can do it together. So we can only do it for 2-player games. But in general, I don't know about you. If I'm bringing a game to game night and I've never played it, I am reading the whole rule book and watching a rules video before I bring it to game night.
I think that should be the standard. I get like you take out the rule book as like a reference document or whatever, but if somebody's like, I want to play this, like, what do you guys think? I'm like, okay. And then they're like, okay, like open a rule book, start reading it. It's like, actually, no, never mind. Like,
yeah.
I'm good.
Well, and
like,
and the funny thing,
let's play something somebody knows how to play right now.
Well, and that's the curse of being at the Gamers Ranch, where you are in a place with a board game library of 2,000 games. And so it's full of games that you're like, I've always been curious about that game, but I don't own it, and I don't know anybody who owns it. And so
it's like, here's your chance.
Here's your chance. However, did I watch 100 rules videos in anticipation of the Gamers Ranch weekend? No, I did not. And so there was a game with my name on it, which was called Robot Quest Arena, which is a deck building robot battling game. And then a game that had a couple people's names on it, which was Three Ring Circus.
Yeah. Let's start with Robot Quest Arena, right? So this
Let's do
is
it.
by the publisher of Star Realms. Is it Wise Wizard
Wise
Games?
Wizard Games.
So, a notable publisher, and this is maybe Kickstarter now or just funded or something like that.
It's on a reprint with expansion Kickstarter currently, and last year it was a hot game at like Gen Con and all the
Okay, cool.
summer conventions. And so the reason I wanted to play this is from seeing it at those conventions, mostly because the art and production are very, very cute. And that was kind of my main attraction.
Yeah, I was kind of there when you unboxed it and like pull out the giant like painted miniatures. It's like, all right, I'm in. Let's do it. All right, so Robot Quest Arena is basically a very simple deck building game, kind of like core Dominion level deck building. You draw a hand of cards on your turn, play as many as you want, discard the rest at the end, and then draw a new hand of 5 cards. And then layered on top of that, you have robots battling in an arena, kind of giving Robo Rally vibes. You're basically using the cards in your hand to move your robot around, to punch other robots. And the key way to gain points is that every time you deal any damage to somebody's robot, you gain those as points. And if you deal the finishing blow, that cube of health is worth 2 points. Their robot immediately responds on their turn. So the punishment for actually getting killed is, or getting defeated or destroyed or whatever, is actually essentially not there at all. In some cases, it could actually just be a benefit because it could put you in a really advantageous position somewhere else across the board for your next fight, which kind of made it just delightful.
Yeah, this to me was almost like bumper cars, or it felt like playing Smash Brothers because you're just running around bopping each other,
Yeah.
and then whoever gets to you when you are at your weakest is the one who gets to knock you out of the arena and get the credit for the kill. And it, I think, was great for a learn from the rulebook experience because, first of all, it's based on mechanics that the three of us who were playing it all immediately understood. We all knew deck building and all of that. But then also the rules were just super intuitive. Like we really, the cards abilities were all super clear, and the game put so few barriers in front of us, just like getting straight to the fun of the game.
Yeah. And we did make a couple of like very small mistakes. I think we like misinterpreted one or two, like one card that was supposed to be points, but instead we thought that was like recovering health or whatever. But like, because the systems in the game are all so solid on their own, right? The way the hand card play works, the way the market works, the way health and the health and points exchange works, that like messing up one thing in a small way didn't actually have any kind of knock on effects to mess anything else up along the way. So even though we, maybe made a small error here or there, I don't think it really impacted the gameplay at all in a negative way. And I think the Smash Bros example is so apt because that's exactly what it is, right? In Smash Bros, you die, you immediately respawn, and you're just like hitting somebody right away. Except for in this one, there's no like, okay, I've lost all my lives and I have to wait for the really good players to finish up. It's just as soon as somebody dies and can't respond, it's immediately over for everybody. That's the end of the game.
Yeah, and it was really fun. It was light. It was I think it was like almost a family weight game. It really worked, and obviously a huge selling point of the game is that it's got these pre-painted minis that are basically like little toys, and it really elevates the whole experience, I think.
Yeah, I do too. And I liked it enough that the next day, similar situations standing around with some other people that weren't in that game. And I was like, this is just like a fun thing we can get out, learn, play in 45 minutes. And I'm really confident that everybody's going to have at least some fun with it. I think in that second play, it did reveal to me that the decision space here is truly featherweight, right? You're kind of just
Mm-hmm.
moving towards the closest robot, doing whatever damage is in your hand, and then any kind of remaining resources you have, you're buying at the market, or you're probably buying at the market more early. And then once you kind of have good cards in your deck, then you're going to be spending your resources moving and fighting. Like, the kind of stuff that we just instantly intuited as having played games before. Now, if you're playing with, family members or, non gamers who might take this well, there probably would be maybe more like decision, more like learning to kind of get to that point. But I felt like for me, playing it twice, okay, I've had the experience. I don't know that I need to play it any more than that. But I was really happy to have played it twice.
For sure. Yeah, that's also one of the benefits of a weekend like this is I can try games that I'm like, is this a game I want to buy? And then I can be like, nope, I actually got all the experience I want out of the game here, and now I can take that off my wish list. But that's not a
Yeah.
bad thing about the game. It's just that like you get to experience it without having to buy it, which, is a luxury when you
Yeah.
can get it.
I think this is a really, good product that's going to fit in well with a ton of people's
For
collections.
sure.
That's Robot Quest Arena, like a
Mm-hmm.
delightful light
Mm-hmm.
deck building game that's like exactly what you expect when you take it off the shelf. It delivers it.
Correct.
And then next up, we also, having had that experience, we decided let's try to learn Three Ring Circus out of the box. Kind of a small box game from Devere, who's a publisher that's like really been on
So
fire
hot right
lately,
now.
most notably for the White Castle. And then what was the other one? They
Well,
did
there was
something else too.
Bitoku. What
I think.
else?
Oh no, it
Oh,
was
Red
Red
Cathedral.
Cathedral and
Yeah.
then White Castle. I think people kind of
Yes.
pair those games together.
Dice
But yeah,
placement
uh,
games and
and this is kind of I think in like that same type of like small box that I think sort of promises like a bigger game experience, but in a small package. And we gave it a shot. So in this one, you're essentially playing as I guess you are a circus caravan and you're moving all across the United States, going to different cities and performing shows with your circus. And you're trying to earn money so you can buy better acts, so that you can go to medium sized cities and big cities where you'll be essentially gaining points. And the clock for the game is that the Barnum and Bailey caravan is slowly moving around the board. And once it completes a full loop, that's the end of the game.
mhm.
And that is Three Ring Circus. So, Pete, how was this one to for us to learn out of the rule book?
Well, I'll first say that like Robot Quest Arena, this is a game that I wanted to play because of the visuals, right?
Yeah.
And even as we were trying to learn to play this game, people were walking by and being like, "Oh, what's this? This is so pretty." And it does. It pops. It pops. And so I was like, "Oh, this rulebook doesn't look too bad." And we're a group of people who all know how to play games. And what was difficult about it is that the rule book was very svelte. Like you can tell that they
Yes.
were like, let's try and communicate the rules in as few words and pages as possible. And that ended up working to the detriment of the game because this game came with, I think, 4 or 5 full rule books in different languages. And so for Devere, this makes sense because they're like, this is one box and we've localized it in X number of languages. The game's fully language independent. None of the components have words on them.
That might also be something that worked against learning it out of the box.
Absolutely. And so I don't know how many times we tried to consult that rulebook as we played because getting a feel for what the game is was very quick. We were like, oh, okay, on your turn, you're either building your tableau of circus performers or you're moving around the map and putting on a show. And that was very clear. However, how you do those things and when you can and cannot put on a show and what you get for putting on a show, I think that we didn't figure out all the rules of it until the last like 15 minutes of the game
Yeah.
as it slowly revealed itself to us.
It was like you were, credit to you. You were the one who really took the onus on reading the rules to start and teaching the rest of us along the way. And so you kind of get to the end of that, and it's like, all right, Jake, you're the first person to go. Like, go and take your turn. It's like, okay, I just have one question. Like, what is a show? Like, what happened? Like, what is the
We could,
show? And it's just like, you're like, it's not
it
in the
doesn't
rule
say it.
book. It
It's
does
not in
not
there.
say.
And
Yeah.
this is because you're making it's a, tell me if you've heard this before. It's a tableau builder where you have 3 rows in your tableau that you build from left to right. We've all seen this, right? However, Jake's had a very real question from playing many of these games, which is, when I put on a show, is that one row of my tableau or is that my whole tableau? And the rulebook just never defined what it means to put on a show.
And there's some element of like sequencing, like this happens before this, that can
Yes.
like earn you some points. So it's like, does it like snake all the way through? Is it like the first row and then the second row and then the third row? Or like you have to have it all in like one row, which is like what we end up like sort of assuming. And they're just like a lot of little things. And I sort of preluded to this earlier. And I think one of the challenges with this is that like getting one thing slightly off here, because it's like this Euro game that is just like a tightly wound puzzle that I think, to this day, I think it's probably a pretty cool game
I
once you
think
know
there's
all
some
the
cool
rules
stuff going on.
and how it
Yeah.
works. But to not know any single element or like how that's supposed to work has huge knock-on effects throughout the whole game, which is just kind of, leads to a little bit of a frustrating learning play experience. Because like whatever I'm doing, I'm just like, I don't really know, if I don't know this important like thing and how it works, then how am I supposed to like plan for everything else that's ultimately kind of like all tied together in a very fundamental way.
And I will say, one thing I will say to the game's credit is that this was not an ideal learning situation, right? And this could have been a bad experience. It was not a bad experience because Jake and I were playing this game with good people who all have a good time together, regardless of what we're doing. And at the end of this frustrating learning experience, I was like, I would play this again. Just because
Right.
by the time we figured out what it was doing, I was like, oh, that's cool. It's too
Right.
late for it to actually be fun, but like now I get it.
Totally. Yeah, I think like just to leverage like two other kind of small criticisms, the graphic design in this game is so beautiful, and I really enjoyed the art, but there were times when we did not know, like we misinterpreted something because we thought that was just like a flourish of art, and then we're like, "Oh no, that is like a important dividing line that tells us like what two different cities want."
Oh my
and
god,
and there's just like also like we're just elements of like the board looks so great as like an art object, but then when you're actually playing it, there's just so much like scanning the board because I'm like, where is Baltimore's, like I know where
yeah,
Baltimore's spot is on the map, but then like what Baltimore references is just in some totally different, very aesthetically pleasing place, but it's definitely loses usability for that, which is, I don't think function over art 100% of the time, but this one felt like maybe it was like just skewed like a little bit too far for me, and I think it was heightened by the
yeah.
fact that we're like struggling through the learning play.
Well, and I think that part of it is the small box because I think the small box shrank the board more than it should have been shrunk. So they
Right.
had to clump multiple cities information together that were not geographically next to each other. And so it functioning as a map and it functioning as a play tool were almost at odds with each other.
Yeah. And
But
then
the
yeah,
art
but
is
it's
great.
the art is great, the components are great. I think if we, and it was just interesting, right? Because it's so for like so unusual that I would ever approach a game in this way. And I truly think like, sitting here on this podcast, if I had showed up to a game night and my buddy is like, hey, let's play Three Ring Circus, and they present it in a way after having read through the rule book, realized the confusing areas, looked them up on Board Game Geek, watched a rules video for further clarification. I think you could probably teach this game in 10 minutes flat, and everybody's
For
just
sure.
off the races having a great time. And I would never know that the rule book is, like, in my opinion, let's just say, not the best. So it does matter, but we're also lucky that there are a lot of other resources that can make it so that great gameplay ultimately probably wins out at the end of the day. So that was our thoughts on learning games out of the rulebook at the Gamers Ranch. And yeah, unfortunately, that's where this week's episode comes to a close. At this point on, Pete and I had a great conversation about games like Strike, Wormspan, QE, and High Society that is unfortunately lost to the ether. Maybe we can convince Pete to come back on and talk about it on a future episode. If you can't wait till then, I would invite you to join us in the Discord, and you can ask Pete and I right now what we think of these games, and I know we'll be happy to chat with you. But thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Decision Space. As always, we want to thank Hembry for our intro and outro song, Reach Out, and wish you a great week. Goodbye, y'all.